This budget update and this government is all about responsible economic management. Responsible economic management, it's what puts downward pressure on inflation and eases the cost of living. And because of our efforts, we are getting the budget in much better nick and making more room for our priorities, and that's what these numbers that we are releasing today show. Our strategy over the past 18 months has delivered an historic turnaround in the budget position, but we know that there is still much more work to do. Our government's economic plan is at its core about three things: easing cost of living pressures, repairing the budget, and investing in the foundations of growth in our economy. Now, we understand that Australians are doing it tough and our economy is slowing, and that's why we are rolling out tens of billions of dollars in cost of living relief. It's why we are fixing the budget and why we are making welcome and encouraging progress in this fight against inflation. Now, last year we delivered the first surplus in 15 years. This year, a much smaller deficit, and you're seeing less debt and smaller deficits over the 4 years of the forward estimates as well. And because of our efforts, we have less debt than any major advanced economy. Now, the mid-year update that we're releasing today shows that the government has returned 92% of upward revisions to revenue since the May budget and 88% of revenue upgrades since we came to office. We have also identified almost $10 billion in savings, which means almost $50 billion in savings over the life of our government, and I know Katie will want to elaborate on that in a moment. And if you combine that with some modest tax changes, we've identified $11.6 billion in budget improvements, which total $72.7 billion since we came to office. So a big part of what we are banking today are the upward revisions to revenue, but there are also decisions in this MYEFO to substantially improve the budget position, including when it comes to savings and reprioritisations in the budget. Because of our efforts, we have almost wiped out this year's deficit. We are now forecasting a much smaller deficit of $1.1 billion in 23-24. This is an improvement of $12.8 billion compared to the budget, and it is a $55.4 billion turnaround compared to what we inherited for this year. We are not yet forecasting a second surplus, but we are within striking distance. We have given ourselves a chance, but we aren't there yet, and we've been deliberately cautious and deliberately conservative. We've seen in recent times, under our predecessors, what happens when you overpromise and underdeliver. We've been determined to take a different approach to this, cautious and conservative when it comes to revenue upgrades, because of the uncertainty and the volatility in the global economy and also in our own domestic economy.
Of the net spend in this MYEFO of $5.2 billion, about 99% of that relates to unavoidable, urgent or dealing with legacy issues. So things like closing the pandemic event visa, our continued response to COVID-19, our response to red fire ants, visa backlogs, Services Australia customer support, the robo-debt response as well, and you can see those outlined in the measures. And although this is not a mini budget, we have focused also on continuing our progress towards women's economic equality. So this update sees the full rollout of gender responsive budgeting, and I'd like to thank the Office for Women and the Public Service for stepping up and responding to this government priority. There is extra resourcing for the additional changes to the paid parental leave scheme, which were recommended by the Women's Economic Equality Task Force. There's extra resourcing for some women's safety measures and further work being done on the Parents Next program. There is also the funding for the Play Our Way women's sports program, which is about ensuring women have access to facilities that encourages their engagement with sport. So the short summary is fiscally responsible, finding savings, reprioritising where we can, resourcing those urgent areas and making room as we continue to respond to those big spending pressures like the interest payments on our debt, NDIS, defence, health and aged care.
Treasurer, real wage growth was forecast at 0.75% this financial year. That's now been revised down to 0.25%. Should that give taxpayers confidence that the measures are working for them?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, that just reflects the near-term uptick in the inflation forecast. So as you know, the real wages calculation involves wages growth and inflation, and for the same reasons as the answer to Katina's question, there's been an uptick in the near term in the inflation forecast, and that has impacted on the real wages forecast. But when it comes to real wages, remember that around the time of the election last year, real wages were falling 3.4%, and there has been a substantial improvement since then. We've actually just seen 2 consecutive quarters of real wages growth, which is good progress. We still expect to see annual wages growth in a sustained way next year. That hasn't changed in the Treasury forecasts. Any of those near-term changes are more a reflection of the inflation part of the story than the wages part of the story.